Hello, and welcome to my slideshow about leading the way to intellectual freedom. My name's Erin, and I'll be going through this with you. First up, what is intellectual freedom? It is the free, unfettered access to all resources to the entire community served. They have to be able to use all those resources offered without any limitation, bringing in resources for the entire community, not just an easy majority. Sometimes it can be kind of common to just have resources for the majority, and it might be a little bit taboo to have all resources covered, but that is a very important part of it. You have to continually monitor, ensure you're keeping up with these resources and keeping up with your community and what they need. It is often referred to sort of as the flip side of the coin on most censorship issues at the library too. And then there's just a little bit of a cartoon at the bottom, but it's just kind of funny. You can read it at no time. Why is it important to libraries? So our oh so holy ALA refers to it as intellectual freedom is the basis for our democratic system. We expect our people to be self-governors, but to do so responsibly, our citizenry must be well informed. Libraries provide the ideas and information in a variety of formats to allow people to inform themselves. So, without the library, in so many words, we would not have access to this information. People would not be as educated, and it would be a way less informed democratic system. It wouldn't be the same system that we now know today. So, ALA is kind of saying without intellectual freedom offered by the library, we would be in a very, very different place. Okay, so the selection versus censorship. These are two things that are very important to this issue. So selection is obviously when you select the items, the resources you'll have available to your community. The selector looks for reasons to keep a book, or I just say book, but in theory, any resource looks for reasons to keep that item. The responsibility of that is often divvied out to several departments, and it usually depends on their specialization. For instance, if someone is especially good with graphic novels, they might be responsible for that section, and so forth. But really, bottom line, the decision comes down to one person, usually the middle manager or like departmental manager, or an upper administrator, if that's like a bigger place, or a smaller library usually, then there'd be like a couple people in charge of selecting all the resources probably, as opposed to a bigger place where there would be a lot of department heads that would kind of take that final decision. And then the other side of that is when they are not choosing items, they choose to reject that item or book, a resource, and so they can look at censorship from a couple different ways. When a decision to purchase a book is challenged, the challenger could be considered censoring. So someone says that the library should get rid of an item, that person on the outside is actually the one that's trying to censor the library, or as opposed to when the library decides not to purchase certain items, that's when the library could be considered censoring. Can come from either side. And the whole other side of this whole issue is the digital divide. So there's 3 levels of digital divide. The global divide, democratic divide, and the social divide. The global divide is literally like we are separated. We have misunderstandings due to that. There's just different cultural things that contribute to that. These all kind of like layer into each other, so they're very related. Also, democratic divide, it's kind of discussing the idea that governmental control of information, they're trying to regulate, keep it away from their patrons, their people, their communities. So there's more of like a governmental side to that. The social divide is really literally like your demographic, your age, income, ethnicity, race, education, your religious beliefs, possibly even, your gender. And it's kind of like just those literal things that make people who they are, and that kind of separates people. But at the same time, you can bring it together. I'll come to that later. But yeah. And also the ability to connect on social media. That's like, literally the social divide there. If they don't have the means or the comprehension to do that, then that's an issue. Okay, and there's some other issues that do contribute to this digital divide. Patrons' technology skill level may be less than ideal, and that might be because they don't have access to get that practice and get used to that, to be more comfortable and that kind of thing. Also, they might just be comfortable with their mobile phone. That's becoming like a big trend, actually. They they can't access certain things just because all they have is their cell phone, their smartphone. So there's a few places that I'm gonna talk about, I guess, in particular where it's at, especially where it's not at. So these a few places: grade schools, prisons, and China. What they have in common is censorship. For a global sense, I kind of wanted to talk about a place that I guess it's not super surprising, but just as innovative as they kind of seem to be, the Chinese they're not quite on board with us in terms of intellectual freedom. It's not super surprising, I guess. But they say today China is one of the fastest growing and most populated countries in the world, but is also undergoing a crisis in regard to censorship and limitation in accessing information in a digital world. So that is just kind of saying they're having problems really getting access, and that's the coming from the global divide, or the demographic divide. Their government is making issue or regulations based on certain policies, and maybe not the most. They maybe don't have the intellectual freedom that we are thinking of in the top of their mind. But yeah, they're working towards it. I mean, the librarians there, they do have the same values and trying for the same things that we are. Moving on though, so elementary schools versus prisons. You wouldn't think they'd have too much in common, but yeah, who has more censorship? Hard to tell. I mean, I'm being a little extreme, obviously, but prisons have a lot of the same censorship that we might put in our elementary schools, those kind of limitations. It says prison libraries have some of the greatest amounts of censorship of all. There are total subject areas or types of books which librarians are instructed to avoid: extremism, militant Islam, anti-American topics, anti-Semitic topics, anti-Western, even like dictionaries, language instruction. I mean, it's a kind of ridiculous. You can read this yourself, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of different things, and a lot of things you might be like, what the why? These men and women, they need that access just as much. I mean, if not more than the rest of us, because they don't have a cell phone or constant internet, that kind of thing. And then more about school censorship, quite a bit, which I don't know, this one's more understandable. It's, for the younger kids and that kind of thing, but more so when talking about like middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're kind of just saying that it comes from a good place, maybe, trying to protect them from offensive things, but ALA's stance on that is not, it's not okay. So you can read that quote on your own time also, but yeah, they're just kind of saying like they don't appreciate restricting anyone's right to read anything. So no matter what your age, here's their Bill of Rights. You can see that intellectual freedom is pretty much woven through their entire library Bill of Rights. So or these main points at least. So yeah, material should not be excluded because of origin, background, or views is contributing to the creation. Material should not be prescribed or removed because of partisan doctrinal disapproval. So it should not have anything to do with the government decision, that kind of thing. Yeah, they should challenge censorship in all relevant cases, obviously within reason, but it's, all these things that kind of, they're all talking about the intellectual freedom, the rights that American Library Association feels that we should have. And we are pretty fortunate to have those things, for the most part in our public libraries. But, we're still working towards making sure that that's actually a free, like, unlimited access. So, and they're also saying you shouldn't deny a person the rights to use the library just because of any of their origin, age, background, or views, etc. Managers are given the impossible task of ensuring communities have this freedom. So it's like they're basically saying we're protecting our patrons' First Amendment rights by making sure there is access to everything that they could need to know what they need to know. So that's sort of what, saying we should maybe be doing this from the time when they're young until they're older. I mean, like, and no matter where you're at. So you should still have that right to like that information. Chicago Public Library was one of the first ones to make an intellectual freedom policy in early 1900s. So they kind of, over here on the right, there's a little like, excerpt, but it's kind of interesting. They give significance to that. The competent person is the library staff. Those people that choose the items, they are giving them that authority, and I think that's kind of important for us to recognize. Also, so finally, how can a manager fill this gap in the digital divide, which is the major issues going on, here? It's a tough, it says it's a tough task. Obviously, it's sometimes it's even beyond their authorities. I mean, sometimes like this little quote says, they're just like how the resource is licensed. They don't have they can't make it accessible to everyone, especially if they're just using their mobile phone, like I mentioned earlier. But some things they can do is, reach out to that vendor, try to make them understand that, you could be reaching more people if you changed, if you had a better format, etc. Instruct your team to remind patrons that there might be other resources they could check out, routers if they need internet. They could borrow laptops if that's available, devices that, they might be able to access these resources more readily. Making it as convenient as possible to do that also. And then offer technology sessions. So your patrons who maybe aren't as confident, like they get a little bit of a confidence boost, and you can help them like jump in that world. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's all for now. And I hope you enjoyed the information there.